in an overview slide, what they've done in the product is to integrate, and you can see a new little icon here in the tray for the client, and that is the persistent chat icon.
And like all the other features like enterprise voice, until you're actually provisioned by policy to be persistent chat, that icon doesn't exist.
Yeah, it doesn't exist, and if you are provisioned and can't create any rooms or aren't subscribed to any rooms, you won't see anything when you click on it. So, and then this second piece of this slide shows what a sort of a use of a persistent chat room is. This is actually an application that's been added in to the persistent chat room and is therefore displayed by all the users who are participating in that chat room. And all these 4 people, when they actually join into that chat room, they get to go back and see an amount of history, generally about 30 lines of history, come up for them when they join that room. But they can, through that search icon, actually right down here, which is unique to the persistent chat tab in the Lync client, they can actually search for any number of things about that persistent chat, who said what they said, search for keywords, search for communications with individual people.
And from a content perspective, it can go back further than the initial display days. That's just there's a hit, obviously, on the server if we were to pull back a year's worth of conversation.
Completely agreed. That search can search back as long as the content is being kept in the database. Right. So, from a topology point of view, we've moved a lot of these or some of the roles that were previously on a persistent chat server have been moved onto the Lync front end. But what you'll notice in most deployments is the persistent chat role, in fact, gets a unique server and a unique database server that runs it. Mm-hmm. So in this case, what you'll notice is there's a persistent chat upload-download service that's now on the front end, and there's the room management web component. It's a new web application that's loaded on the front end.
Right, and just like any other web app that happens to be there, it's one of the apps, so yep. It's going through your simple URLs and getting to what it's going to.
Yep. And then common, and actually coming from the older group chat days, there's this channel service and the compliance service. Those still exist inside of the persistent chat server role here. And those interact with the persistent chat store, the compliance file store, and then finally the file store is interacted with through this file download. File download's a little fun one about the client. The server still supports file upload and download, but the Lync 2013 client isn't actually capable of interacting with upload at this time.
Right, but we can use the old group chat client to connect to the new persistent chat backend and transfer files if you want it.
Most definitely. There's a small thing you've got to do to get that working. You got to create some endpoints, but we'll get into that hopefully in the demo. So in terms of the components and the requirements, really you're just in a situation of you need 1 or more servers running the persistent chat server, and what this speaks to is it's not technically supported to coexist the persistent chat role on a front end in an enterprise pool.
And that's actually a question that just came up. Can this be co-located in an enterprise front end pool?
No, it's not supported to be co-located in an enterprise pool. It's technically supported in a standard edition server. It's not recommended for any size or scale of either environment.
Right, so you can do it from a POC, limited number of boxes. It will work, but production you would never want to roll out standard edition with persistent chat on it.
No, not if you're going to have any load of any user type on either one.
Right.
So you need at least 1 or more servers. The persistent chat server does in fact use a different replication technology than Lync server for its database high availability. It uses SQL log shipping for its high availability method. And then if compliance is enabled, you in fact need a separate server to host the compliance backend. Since there's a potential for so much communication going on in the Lync persistent chat role, we have a unique SQL server and a unique persistent chat compliance role that handles those things. In terms of designing a persistent chat environment, really we need to talk about the organizational requirements, what the server infrastructure is, and then really we get into the meat of this, which is what it takes to design a persistent chat room. When you're talking and thinking about persistent chat, you need to ask yourself and your organization a set of questions. Those questions are really important because they will both dictate how large of an infrastructure you use, how many servers you use, as well as give you an idea of the business use you've got for those, and therefore dictate, again, turning those business requirements into organizational and into design decisions.
That's right. And really, this is key for the persistent chat, because while it may seem like something simple and easy to push out, the potential impact of the I/O load and the updates and things that are happening could seriously impact the performance and the desired outcome of a persistent chat deployment. So this all has to be well thought out and used.
Not just that, but here, are there any compliance or regulatory requirements you've got for your organization that require you to truncate data out of your persistent chat room? How long do you have to keep that stuff in your compliance store? Those are all questions you need to answer, because they will dictate how large the file store is, how large your SQL store is, how large your database is.
And potentially, that is the actual design of the Lync server topology as well, since you can only have one group chat pool per site. You've got to figure out, then do I need now do I need to break things up in order to get the compliance side to work the way we think it's going to work?
Most definitely. So in terms of some of the other questions, you're asking yourself how many users and who is going to be enabled and what user profile do they have? Meaning, how are your users that you've enabled for group chat a member of one chat room, 10 chat rooms, 100 chat rooms? How many people are in those chat rooms? What's the amount of communication they're doing? What's your migration scenario? Are you coming from a prior group chat version? Are you coming from a prior version of the product? Do you have any compliance or regulatory concerns? How do you want to control those scopes and ethical boundaries and access? Are you in a situation where you need to really lock that down and prevent those accesses in an active way, or can you let those access preventions happen in a much more passive way and simply, rather than actively deny somebody access, simply let them not be denied access through lack of membership? Mm-hmm. How do you want to create rooms? Do you want to force users to fill out service requests to get rooms created? Do you want to let end users create their own rooms? How do you want to manage that process? What kind of add-ins do you want to provision? Are you trying to provision web applications? Are you trying to provision Office applications? Are you trying to provision sales applications and line of business applications into your pChat rooms?
And again, are you provisioning them for an actual whiz-bang functionality, or are you provisioning for actual business gain? Because if it's not the gain, you will hurt yourself. Persistent chat can take you down a rat's hole that you don't want to go down.
Yep, most definitely. And then finally, and a very important question, what kind of availability and disaster recovery environments do you have for this persistent chat environment? Because it is handled uniquely of the Lync roles in its persistent or in its high availability and disaster recovery.
Yeah, and unfortunately so. But it's different. It doesn't tie directly in the same way that we're doing. Some of it, we have the database mirroring and things of that nature, but otherwise we're a stretched pool concept in order to get HAD working, and it's different for DR. Well, anyway, but we'll get into that in the HADR.
So, in terms of the server infrastructure, really it's very similar. The thing you should remember from from group chat through persistent chat, we've now really moved that communication into the XCCOS over SIP. So it's now happening within band of the SIP protocol in the Lync client.
But still a different protocol on the back end.
But still a different protocol that is going to that persistent chat pool. So you effectively just register to your Lync pool in the same way. Your Lync pool will discover all the persistent chat rooms that you are a member of and present those to you in that Lync group chat tab, or the persistent chat tab. In terms of, there's a Lync pool B here. The reason that Lync pool B is because it doesn't matter if you're on pool A or pool B, you can access those rooms that you're a member of.
All right, and that stretches site to site or within?
Yeah, site to site, region to region. You may see some delays if you're crossing regions, but it stretches all those things. So from a enterprise pool topology, we definitely support multiple Lync pools. You can have one or more persistent chat pool with, here's where Brian was getting into the high availability story. You can have up to 4 active persistent chat servers supporting up to about 80,000 active endpoints. The catch there is you can have another 4 persistent chat pool servers in another site in a standby. They aren't active, but they can be brought up. They're warm standbys.
Yeah, and in that, there could potentially be a mix with 2 active in one site. Point being, you can only have 4 active at any time.
Yep.
Wherever they happen to be, whether it's 2 in one, 2 in another, 2 passive, or 4 active, 4 passive, or whatever.
1 and 3, however you want to do
You've got it. You've got the limit. We do have a question that came up: is what's the maximum number of users that can be added to a single room?
I don't actually know.
It's a lot, and I don't have an actual physical number either. But
the thing to remember, though, when you're doing that deployment of maximum number of users, it's really about the load that you're going to see.
Right.
If you drop 1,000 concurrent users into a chat room, the load of sending a single IM is pretty high.
Right, especially if, depending on active people added to it, or when they come in and they pull down and see it. I mean, you have to think everything that's in persistent chat, whether you're online or not, at some point there will be a hit to the environment when they log in, because you're going to be downloading that content.
Yep.
As well as if there's active users in it and inactive users, all the active users participating, it's a flood potentially that's happening of messages coming in and out of the environment. So the sizing is very different for a lot of small rooms versus a few big rooms.
Yep.
And there is consideration and sizing guidelines online for that. So.
Most definitely. And it should be remembered that in Lync 2013, we have a new type of room that can help to cut down on some of that depending on the business use case. We'll get to that in a minute. So in terms of virtualization support, just like all the rest of the components of Lync Server, it can be virtualized, and it's fully supported to be virtualized. It is recommended definitely to have a standalone database for persistent chat content and compliance. That is, you don't, from a performance and reliability point of view, you probably don't want to have another instance of SQL on your SQL server running the persistent chat database for your persistent chat environment compared to your Lync environment. We use SQL mirroring for database high availability, and for stretched pools with DR, we definitely jump over and do log shipping.
Another question came up: why does persistent chat need so many resources that it has to be deployed separately?
Really, it's about the architecture and design, and the fact that it is that big broadcast and that big swarm of data. If you've got 10 people each subscribed to 10 rooms and logged into those 10 rooms all at the same time, and any one room receives a message, that's going to 10 separate clients with 10 separate connections with 10 separate database hits for all the people who are logged in and active on those, and every single one of them, their client then has to determine, am I going to pop up an alert? Am I going to send some alternate message to this user because they've just received a chat in their window? It's a very different architecture just because of the scale that can grow so quickly and because these things exist for so long. Okay. Hopefully that answered your question. In terms of designing a persistent chat room, really your best practices are that you probably, and this is in most cases, you want to have a single category scope. Category scopes are really that overarching thing that contains all of the pieces of your organization. If your business needs have some other requirement for you, you can definitely talk about that, and you may end up putting yourself into 2 scopes or 3 scopes to partition those things off.
Right, we can create these ethical boundaries by having different scopes created, that there can be no user get access or see anything, or they're completely blocked off because we've set from an OU structure who can be, who cannot be, who can see, who cannot see,
and denied memberships, in fact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll see more of that hopefully in the demo.
Hopefully. You can turn on and let your users create their own chat rooms. There's now you no longer need a separate tool to be able to do that. It's actually a web interface that the client will pop up for you and send you to an internal URL for the group chat service on the front end to create those things. Relevant metadata about these rooms is very important. What's the descriptor of the room? How do you expect people to behave in the room? What's the expected mode of operation for that room? You entirely possibly may have a custom room creation workflow. You may have to send it through your business processes. The group chat or the persistent chat API and the SDK that are out there are very powerful and if you've got a lot of business processes wrapped into your persistent chat, you probably want to look at what you can do with the persistent chat API and SDK.
Yeah, for automation and making your life much nicer.
Most definitely. And last but not least, we mentioned use add-ins. Those add-ins are going to be things that provide you additional business data and additional business drivers to keep group chat relevant and involved in your business. So deploying and configuring persistent chat, it's gotten so much simpler. It's almost
Yeah, I see it the whole way that Microsoft does all of the deployments. It's almost too simple that you're going to box yourself in and do things wrong.
Yep.
Because it's so simple.
It is.
And it is a very simple deployment now,
yeah.
Especially compared to the olden days of the 2007 R2
yeah.
deployment of chat back in the day.
Even Lync 2010 wasn't all that pretty. There was a separate set of tools. There was separate administration tools, separate administration clients.
Right. Yeah. But we're much better now. Getting there.
So your steps for deploying persistent chat, just like any other Lync role, adding one or more persistent chat pools into your topology and adding one or more persistent chat servers into each of those pools, right? In that definition of the pool, you will join it. You will define what its SQL store is, right?
Again, ideally, a separate at least instance,
server,
if not server.
Yep.
Right.
If you're sharing instances, please do separate disks.
Yeah. I mean, the real message is that persistent chat has a massively different impact on I/O compared to, especially since we moved so much I/O off the SQL Server for 2013. That's not the case for persistent chat.
Most definitely. So you configure the administration using RBAC. There is a persistent chat administrator role that you'll have to grant your people access to. And then configuration of persistent chat. That's the part where you get in and create your scopes, create your rooms, create your add-ins, create the other pieces that give your users additional value to the environment.
And that's all through PowerShell or through the web components or?
So the basic configuration that I'm talking here is through the web or through the control panel or through PowerShell. So in terms of configuring and managing rooms, we've got these sort of 4 scopes or roles that people might have inside of a persistent chat environment. We've got this role of administrator. When you're a CS persistent chat administrator role, you can delete earlier content from any chat room to keep the database from going too large. You can remove or replace messages. So this is a new feature in the Lync Server 2013 environment, that there is a supported method to remove and potentially replace inappropriate or flagged messages.
Okay. Ideally, it doesn't get there in the first place, but now at least there's a method to deal with it if it does end up in the room.
Right. And since, as we say, since this data is persistent and sits there in the database forever and ever, this is potentially a very important thing for a lot of companies. End users. The interesting piece here is end users can't delete content from the chat rooms. They can simply insert content into those chat rooms, even if you wrote that piece of content. So you can't take back what you've written in persistent chat.
Yeah. Which is no different than any other IAM. Once it goes, it goes. It's to whomever it's ending up at, right?
Yep.
It's just, this is persistent. And so everybody will know that you wrote what you wrote once they gain access to this room.
Right. Once they search for you, they'll see everything you wrote.
Yes.
So there's this additional role called a chat room manager, and that's actually granted through the persistent chat room management in the web UI. You can grant who's the manager of this room that you've uniquely just created. Managers can disable rooms, but they can't delete them. This is, again, a new feature of Lync 2013 persistent chat, that we have a supported and managed way to delete rooms. In 2010 and before, the best you could ever do was disable a room and prevent users from accessing it, but the data continued to be in the database and continued to be there.
But the chat rooms can actually be removed by the administrator side or by the manager side?
Chat rooms can be removed by the administrator. They can be deleted completely by the administrator only.
Right, but disabled by the manager side.
Yep. Most definitely. And then we've got this unique new feature or new role called a presenter. There's a new type of chat room or persistent chat room called an auditorium. And there's a role specific to that, each unique room. There is a role that is called the presenter. Those are the only users that are able to post messages in this room. Members and managers of this room, in fact, can only view and read content.
It's a broadcast type room, and whoever has the mic
Yep.
is the person that can actually talk.
Yep.
Right.
A little bit of a uniqueness about these, about the presenter and the auditorium rules. You can't use them or interact with them through the web UI or anything except for PowerShell.
Yeah. A question that came up was, can you elaborate on persistent chat add-ins, how to develop them, or can you use SharePoint to achieve that?
You can definitely use SharePoint to post all that content. In terms of elaborating, I think you're going to have to look at, it's about embedding line of business applications in your persistent chat rooms. When you deploy an add-in, really all you're doing is pointing the add-in at a URL on a server.
Right, and so it's got to be something that exists. It's not so much that we're developing a persistent chat add-in.
Yeah.
We're simply specifying, in this room, display this HTML content.
Yes, that's exactly it. It's a little bit of a misnomer. We call it an add-in, but in fact it's simply this ASP or HTML content is going to be displayed for all users at all times in this persistent chat
And that could
room.
be something as simple when you're playing. Go add an add-in of Bing.com. When you add it to a room, you'll see Bing.
Yep.
It'll be up on the room. So it's really just a URL that you're publishing a creation point for.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions?
One came up that said, I would imagine that chat rooms can get out of control and so numerous in the same way that SharePoint sites spring up and have duplicate content. How do admins help the organization avoid that type of sprawl?
So we talked about that back here on this slide about custom room creation workflows. Use the persistent chat APIs and SDKs to give yourself a workflow that manages the creation and deletion of those persistent chat rooms. Don't give users the ability to create their own rooms ad hoc.
Yeah, or remove it all together and have an administrative personal workflow that's outside. If you're not going to develop the SDK and APIs, fine.
Sure.
But create a workflow on paper.
An Excel spreadsheet that says
things have to get
user,
approved and what they're for in one massive sheet so you know what's what.
And then only let administrators create rooms.
Right.
Don't give end users the ability to create those rooms.
Exactly. Okay.
So with that said, I think we're going to take a very short break. We'll be back in just a minute with another session on administration or on maintenance.
No, this is archiving and monitoring.
Archiving and monitoring.
And by short, we mean like a 1 minute break. So don't go anywhere. We're just taking a short break.
Thanks.